What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to look at why we celebrate tragedies, particularly like big historical ones, and I'll get into why I'm looking at this in a second, because it does come up in the article. But first, just acknowledging that this article is linked in the description and below. If you'd rather just go and read it on your own, it's completely fine. For those of you who want to stick around, let's get into it. Alright, so basically the author here starts off by sort of painting a picture basically of and like easing us into the topic, I guess, by telling us about this one time that he was inadvertently a witness to a march that was remembering the Srebrenica massacre, which happened in the Netherlands. We've got, where is it? Here. It was the first time that an acknowledged genocide took place on the European continent since World War II. And essentially, during the Bosnian War, Serbian military had marched closer to the line, I guess, and Dutch troops had to pull back, leaving 8,000 Bosnian Muslims to be slaughtered. Obviously, quite a tragedy. But then obviously it mentions World War II as well, and there is sort of, I mean, whenever we're talking about the wars, we always get the word commemoration and never celebration. But there are other dates that get the word celebration that really, when you look into them, shouldn't be things that you celebrate. And one of those things is, and this is the one that I'm going to sort of look at it through the lens of, is this whole debate about whether or not the date for Australia Day should be changed. I'm well aware that was last month, but this article does get into Black Lives Matter, so I'm going to take off from there. It's about the third paragraph, if you're scrolling down on the site. Also, this was written August 12th, 2020. Okay, so it's not that old. Could still be relevant. Cool. Alright, so it says here, we're currently seeing the Black Lives Matter protests take hold of the world as they bring attention to the many faults in American as well as global society. One of the most important aspects of this debate is the urge to lay bare the excruciating mistakes of the past and uncover their lasting consequences in the present. Only by accepting the past sins of slavery and segregations and acknowledging its effects on the present, can it be possible to find a better and more just way forward to the future. And I think that last line in particular, only by accepting the past sins and acknowledging their effects on the present, can we sort of look to the future. Because that's really what is at the core of this debate for us in Australia, because our Black Lives Matter is also our First Nations and our Indigenous population. So it's a lot, and obviously a lot of people within those communities feel like celebrating that day is sort of perpetuating this idea of racism, and that's obviously something we need to address. And I just, particularly with Valentine's Day just gone, that was actually the date of ancient Roman festival, which I will make a whole video on, called Lupercalia. If it's already up, it should be the very next video on my channel, so go and check it out if you want the full backstory for that. But yeah, so it's celebrated on that, with all of its backstory and history there, and also it's named after the name of a priest who allowed men to get married in ancient Rome when the emperor wanted them to join the army and go to war instead. He didn't want them tied down by family and therefore not wanting to go off and fight. And so this Valentine was like, no, being married is a great honor and a great responsibility. They can serve the empire in this way by, building a stronger generation in the next one. And obviously the emperor was like, no, we need to fight now though. And so, yeah, he was executed for that. He was executed for allowing people who loved each other to be together. Which, I mean, modern day equivalent would be allowing LGBT people to marry, making gay marriage legal. It is in Australia, we've already voted on that. It is. I think it's legal most everywhere now, but it is still something that some people in some countries still have to sort of fight for. That would be sort of the modern equivalent, basically. So yeah, this is already making its point. There are things that have happened in the past that we're like, oh yeah, no, we're not making that same mistake, and yet we are, just on a different topic. And that's why I think that this is important. Cool. So continuing on, it reads, remembering human tragedy and openly admitting its reality and possibility is the only way to avoid similar injustices. Recalling the past is not a condemnation of the present, even when it's critical of it. If anything, recalling the horrible events make us aware of human fragility and the never-ending ways we can fail our future selves. This knowledge should make us encouraged, not ashamed about the present, as we are able to avoid the mistakes that came before us and have a chance to rectify what our predecessors had wrong. And I think that part there is where, in a lot of cases, so with Black America, with slavery particularly, in Australia, things like Terra Nullius, the Stolen Generations, those sorts of things, you always hear the "but I wasn't there" argument, and this here is saying we know that, they know that, right? You need to stop looking at this as like, oh, you're blaming me, so you must be thinking I was actually there, which is stupid, and therefore you're just being more racist towards them by being like, but I wasn't there. They know that. What they're wanting you to do though is use the privilege that you have inherited to fix the mistakes of your predecessors in this quest for equality. The past can only shame us if we stand idly by as history is either ignored or slowly forgotten. This is ancient wisdom. It's the reason why ancient Greek tragedies are still widely admired today. They're also studied, read, and watched today. What Greek plays were able to do was encompass the tragedies of life into a recognizable and relatable story. Human errors such as prejudice, inequality, and injustices were shown in the context and reality in which they often occur. Right and wrongs are messy scale, and injustice can happen by accident or can be tolerated through the status quo. Forgetting the reality, fragility, and human aspects of tragedy means forgetting how things happened and how they can happen again in different forms. Racial, social, and sexual violence were taken to extremes by bad people, but they were tolerated and kept in place by normal people with normal lives. one part that I want to sort of go back to is the whole idea of Greek tragedies and Greek stories and fables and stuff still being prevalent. They are still prevalent even in children's media. Like it's not like I had to go to high school and study ancient history or drama to learn about these Greek tragedy plays and stuff. A Bug's Life is based on an Aesop fable called The Grasshopper and the Ant. And it's the story in the original fable is exactly what is in A Bug's Life, minus the circus bugs. It's about an ant that works all summer long to collect food for himself, and then when the rains start coming in autumn and winter, the grasshopper comes and tries to steal all his food, because he'd been enjoying summer and lazing about instead of thinking ahead. And that's exactly what Hopper and Flick represent. They represent the hard-working ant who is trying to maximize the amount of food that he has for his colony by the end, by the rainy season. And then we literally go to Hopper's hideout, and it's essentially just like a biker gang clubhouse where they're all just hanging out and drinking and eating their stolen goods and whatnot. And it's perfect. You just add Heimlich into it, and it's a perfect film. Enough about my favourite Pixar film. However, continuing on, where were we up to? Yeah, cool. So racial, social and sexual violence were taken to extremes by bad people, but they were tolerated and kept in place by normal people with normal lives. A key example of this is the caricatures we see of people of colour in, particularly in like cartoons, is where it's done the worst. Apu from The Simpsons, for one, he's an Indian man. He's shown as having, like 7 children, all, that are all like toddlers or whatever, because, Indians generally have larger families. He works at a 7-Eleven, and I'm pretty sure that that's only because that's where he was going to get the more screen time instead of chucking him in a taxi. And so it's just perpetuating the stereotype about Indian people. Pretty much the entirety of Cleveland show perpetuates different perspectives and visions of what black people are like. And while someone might actually be like, that's exactly how I view them, and that person might actually be racist, you might be like, I'm not racist, I just enjoy the comedy in it. You're also not helping the situation by consuming that content, is what that sentence means. Someone has taken a stereotype to the extreme, and then just being a normal person and enjoying that extreme, even if you're aware that it is an extreme, and it's being played up for comedic effect. The fact that you are consuming that is allowing someone else to be like, okay, well, it's okay to continue this kind of behaviour because other people enjoy it, and that's not at all what it should be. Many might not have agreed with the status quo, and surely many more would never have wanted those kinds of circumstances if they would have seen a glimpse of the possibility of a fairer and better society. Commemorating the horrors of the past allows us to not forget the very real ability of humans to normalise injustice and see the tragedies for what they are. Human mistakes that can happen everywhere. Mistakes that can be made or continued by decent and horrible people alike. Remembering is crucial to learn, and not only by doing so can we truly appreciate, celebrate, and continue pushing progress as we hold our preceding selves accountable. And I think that's where my biggest stance on particularly Australia Day it comes into play, is that it's not that it should be celebrated, it's that it should be commemorated. And because like I said before, whenever anything has to do with the war, I'm like, oh no, so many people died, and there was like the Holocaust, and we commemorate those things. But then something like, you know, the systematic slaughter and segregation of Australia's First Nations people, and we decide to celebrate the day that European settlers first arrived. I can understand why they're upset about that, because we celebrated instead of commemorating it. Australia, I mean, if we need to have a national day, May 8, I've heard around so often. Otherwise, we should celebrate on the, like the 19th of January, so that when it's written down it looks like 1901, because that was the year that we got our federation. That's another date that we could use. So we've got 1901, we've got May 8 for the word mate, which is a very colloquial term used in Australia. So there's a couple of options, and I know that there's other ones floating out there. I'm just going to pick those two though, and we can quite easily have those there. The 1901 is like a week before, so it allows us to still celebrate at roughly the same time, and then a week later we have the commemoration of, okay, and then we need to still remember that even though it's middle of summer and we're all out enjoying the beaches and whatnot, we do need to remember that however many years ago, depending on what year it is, first settlers came and, started to destroy these beautiful cultures, that honestly, if I ever got the opportunity to, I would love to learn more about these people's cultures from them firsthand. But at the moment, they quite obviously don't really like having people come into their communities, because of what history's done to them, and I don't blame them for that. That seems fair enough to me. Okay, let's finish off this article. So it goes, it's almost cliche to say that history should be remembered, but there's a reason why great thinkers such as Martin Luther King preached that we are made by history. We should always discuss what's happened in the past, both the good and the bad. Our experiences make us who we are, and both the terrors and successes of the past are fundamental of our current societies. Ignoring history or avoiding awkward conversations should never occur. As much as we would prefer use not, mistakes and tragedies are part of the human story, of our personal and collective stories. They are just as fragile, messy and real as we are. They are stories of unforgettable tragedies, as well as the heroes who overcame the errors of the past. Stories of the many slip towards darkness and the numerous climbs to a brighter future. Don't understand it all, but that's what it's just trying to say. Anyway, protests are a tool to remember how effortlessly miscalculations were made by those before us, often more frequently by the great men and women than the wicked, and how we stand up to demand better and more caution from our current and future selves. A mistake can be just around the corner, but so is progress. It's our duty to commemorate the humanity of how we slipped up in the past, so we can ensure the spirited pursuit of improvement. As inconvenient as it is, we are not freed from our history, and thus not free to ignore the issues of our time. Ultimately, we are responsible for our societies and its history and consequences. Therefore, we must always remember where we came from and serve the advancement of ourselves. As most things in life, we must always evolve and change for the better. And then he sort of finishes off by tying it back to his little opening bit, which is more of a personal statement to the author himself. But I like, where was the line that I liked? I wanted to sort of interject something in there as well. Here, ignoring history or avoiding awkward conversations should never occur. That generally comes out of fear, and fear is what makes us make mistakes. I don't think anyone's ever made a good decision based on fear. And it could be the fear of being seen as someone who is being racist when all you're trying to do is, develop your understanding. And I think that's, at the moment, that's the most difficult thing to do within society at the moment, is to, whether it's with different people of different ethnicities or sexualities or whatever it is. If you're trying to learn about these things, obviously the people you want to talk to are the people experiencing that firsthand. But you are completely ignorant to that. If you have no knowledge of the subject, you are completely ignorant to the fact. That is not trying to be cruel or anything. That is just the facts. You are ignorant to that situation. And so obviously, when you ask, you're not going to know how to word it properly because you don't know. And people are so quick to go, oh, you're being, racist or sexist or homophobic or, whatever it might be. And it's, we've gotten to a point where everyone's so quick to just jump on the I'm being offended by this thing, that it's now become really difficult to move past that because no one's willing to actually sit down and be like, okay, you genuinely want to learn so that you can not be racist or sexist or homophobic or ableist or whatever it might be. And I've found that a couple of times myself, trying to sort of come into conversations like, how do I come at this because I'm genuinely curious and I have no idea. And I usually start off by saying that, being like, hey, I'm very interested in this, but I have no knowledge of this subject. So if I say something that is offensive, just let me know and I'll make a note of that. Is generally how I've gone into those conversations. But that's apparently why it's important to commemorate tragedy. I think that's why we do it as well, because in this day and age we know we can do better. And so it's a case of remembering the things so we don't make the same mistakes, so we don't commit sins of the father or have history repeat itself or any of these other idioms that mean that same sort of a thing. And hopefully one day we'll come to an arrangement here in Australia where the First Nation people feel like their voice has been heard and that their concerns are being met in a humane way that still allows other people that want that day to be that day still. And I think it'd be really cool if we put Australia Day on the 19th and then have this commemoration, like First Nations Commemoration Day or whatever, on the 26th. That gives us a whole week in between where we could have festivities. There could be, similar to like Mardi Gras, instead of painting that same street rainbow, paint it with Aboriginal art. Put Aboriginal artworks and stuff up in museums and art galleries and stuff. Have Aboriginal artists performing on street corner. Like, make it a festival of First Nations people across the country. I think that'd be great. That would be so cool. just an idea. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If you've got other ideas, let me know in the comments down below. If you're new here, please hit the subscribe button. Don't forget to ring the notification bell if you want to be notified when I upload new videos. And that's it, I'm done for this video. So until next time, guys, keep your head screwed on.